This episode of the Citadel Cafe is brought to you by listeners like you. Visit patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe to find out how you can become a patron and help make this show possible. This is the Citadel Cafe, episode number 332 for Wednesday, September 4th, 2019. My name is Joel Duggan, and the Citadel Cafe is where my friends and I hang out to talk about the geeky stuff that we are into. Joining me this morning is Megan Townsend. You can find her at Megan Townsend on all the social media that matters, and of course on YouTube. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I cannot believe that it's September.
I know, right?
This is bizarre, and it's always like that back to work, back to school, kind of put your head down vibe. And I have a couple
Yeah.
of projects right now that are starting, and I'm in this like frantic plate spinning prep mode, all for things that I hope work out. So it's like spinning 7 plates and then trying to figure out which 3 I have to keep spinning for the next 6 months. Like it's just
I feel you.
stressful is not the
I
word.
feel you.
Now, I'm not complaining as an independent, artist and as an entrepreneur. Having a lot of plates is not a bad thing. I much prefer this to tumbleweeds because the tumbleweeds when
hmm
nothing is going on is way more stressful. However, it's been hard to find time to do recreational stuff to talk about. So like
Yeah.
I'm behind on Minecraft stuff for the Spawn Chunks. I would say I'm behind on some stuff for the Citadel Cafe, but it's not entirely true because I've been grabbed by what we're going to be talking about today. And but I'm just noticing like everything else is falling by the wayside, and I'm starting to fall back into this trap of working after dinner, which I did very well all summer to not do. And
Right.
so I'm now like getting into like bookkeeping and doing some stuff, and all of a sudden it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I'm still working, and it's just like, no, I should not be doing this. I was talking with a friend on a hike on Sunday, and just kind of confessing like how little gets done when you force yourself to just work kind of like 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock. Like as an entrepreneur, when you don't put in like all these extra hours, you don't work one of your weekend days. Like if you try to keep it as close to 9 to 5 ish as possible, with all
hmm
the different things that you have to do, actually, this is a blanket statement, of course. This is very specific to my experience, but with all the things that you have to do as an independent, if you don't put in these extra hours, you start to fall behind like very quickly. And so it's really, I find it very difficult to balance. So yeah, it's been eye opening. I guess I'm trying to figure out a way to work smarter, not harder, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I understand. I feel you.
Hmm. On a positive note, though, Cape Split was lovely. I had a really nice hike on Sunday. It was a holiday weekend, of course, in Canada. For those of us that get them, I had to work Monday because we record this bunch chunks.
hmm
But I had a really nice hike. I had never done Cape Split. I had heard from a number of other people that hike it that it is while it's a pretty view, the hike to get there is not the most imagined, and I enjoyed the day, and I did. I mean, I always like a hike. It's not like I'm going to dislike it, but it's not the
hmm
top of my list. The view was fantastic, but it's an out and back hike. So once you've reached your destination, had lunch, and enjoyed a beautiful view of the Minas Basin, you kind of just have to turn around and go back again. And
Right.
and while it's a well maintained trail, it's usually about 4 foot wide at least in most places. Uh, it doesn't really feel so much like a hike. It feels more like a city park, like you do in terms of like that kind
Okay.
of stuff. Now, there was lots of mud. There was a lot of, there was a couple of tricky places, but nothing like the hikes. Well, for example, the hikes that you and I have been on, like Prospect was, the footpath is as wide as your feet. and really no more,
Yeah.
right? Like
No.
you really
And
felt like,
muddy.
yeah. Well, and this was muddy, but it was avoidable in a couple places where you can kind of like duck off the trail into the woods. And the trail in Cape Split is a multi-use trail, so people can take their mountain bikes and stuff through. So that usually means that there's more mud because the bikes tear up the ground a lot more than people do. It was also crowded. Uh, there was not a walk in the woods alone. We were encountering other people every 10 minutes. So, I mean, holiday weekend, beautiful day. So
Mm.
there are some things. I mean, I went in there expecting that. It was Labor Day weekend. It was Sunday. I knew that it was going to be packed. Like it's one of the last kind of weekends where people have time to do stuff like this. So I knew it was going to be good. But I mean, everybody was nice. It was a little bit. Every once in a while, you kind of had to like make way for a group of people or whatever. I did get some very, very pretty photos though, and
Did you post those anywhere?
yeah, I posted a couple on Instagram. I haven't posted all of them yet, again, because I'm just behind on all the things that fall behind are just like the essential Instagram is happening as far as promoting stuff goes, but like all the cool stuff I wanted to share, I just haven't gotten around to yet.
Hmm.
Plus, I also found that my phone is not taking the best photos all the time. So sometimes I'll be just like, yeah, I want to share that, and then realize, crap, I have to do some editing on my computer before I can share that.
Hmm.
Not that it's I'm being terribly picky. It's more like, oh, there's a dude in this one, and I can't. Like I'm more comfortable um, editing stuff on the bigger screen because like I have a small phone, so doing any kind of like cropping and adjustments of colors and things like that or balancing, I'm just like I can't see what I'm doing. It's too small. So I'll do some stuff like that. I did catch one very very pretty shot, which actually reminded me about what we're going to be talking about today, and it's just it was a different wooded area for a cape that's so close to salt water and surrounded on two sides by salt water and probably deals with some extreme weather in the wintertime. There was a lot of um, just is it deciduous trees? Those are the ones that shed their leaves, right?
I think so,
Yeah,
yes.
a lot of maple trees and a lot of birch and I want to say maybe oak, but man, green, like it was neon. It was so bright.
Oh,
It
wow.
was incredible, and because there was nothing else, like there was no um, evergreens in the way. There was no dead trees in the way. Like everything was just alive. No, it didn't. It also didn't hurt that there was no clouds in the sky, like none. So it was a bright, 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 beautiful day. And I'll try to put it in the show notes. But I did post it on Instagram. But it was just a phenomenal view in some places within the hike. Now, leading up to the like some parts of the hike were also pretty boring. Like it was just kind of like walking a dirt road. Like it didn't seem like it was all that imagined. I'm used to hikes being a little bit more twisty turny, and so that I find that helps with an out and back hike when you're turning a corner and you don't know what you're going to see. Whereas in Cape Split, you can kind of always see about 100 yards ahead of you. So,
Okay.
so like it's not quite as like you go around a bend and then everything is revealed, like um it happened a couple times, but not as often as I would expect on a 8 kilometer route. But I still highly recommend it. It's still a great hike, especially for people that are maybe not um that are maybe new to hiking, like because it's not super challenging in terms of like it's long, but you're not going to be like scrambling rocks and it's not tricky footing at all. Outside of being a little slippery in muddy spots, but it's not like you have to scramble or worry about, well, I mean, I guess everybody has to always worry about twisting an ankle, so be careful. But like, it's not a challenging hike.
Right.
You're not going to be unbalanced or like we saw quite a lot of families, including grandparents, out doing this because it's flat enough that people can generally deal with it. There's some incline, like you have to go up some hills and stuff, but it's still like a flat grade. You're not going up like stairs of rocks or anything like that. There's a couple of places where they could use some planks, like to deal with the mud.
I
Um,
definitely felt that about Hi Hat as well in
yeah,
Prospect. Like I think there was some, but they were already pretty much submerged in the mud
yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, I mean, like we can probably get some more planks here if we
Hmm.
want to make this safe and walkable, because we don't want anyone rolling an ankle in the mud
Hmm.
or getting a shoe stuck or something. Like, so
Yeah.
um having more planks I think would be nicer. But yeah, carry on about this area.
Well, no, that's really all I have to say. I mean, it's managed by the province, I think. So I mean, it could use a little bit more love. Whereas High Head is a private, like
Mm.
it's a private conservation thing. So that's just
Oh,
like
okay.
volunteer managed, and there's probably volunteers at Cape Split too. But I just feel like because there's obviously places where they've built bridges and they've done some stuff, and I don't mind hopping over a stream. That's fine. I'm talking about the places where you really have to go kind of out of your way from a mud hole, and you can clearly see where people have had to kind of duck into the woods to go around stuff. And in some
Mm-hmm.
places there weren't ways to avoid that, and I think they could do a little bit of maintenance to kind of alleviate that. And in some cases it could be just as simple as not so much laying down planks, but just like digging a trench along the side of the path so that the water doesn't go down the middle of it. Because there'd be places where, like, obviously rainwater has just washed away chunks of the path, and or is just like skirting down the entire path, and the whole thing is just like an inch of water, and which is fine, but it just when you go to walk on it, it can be very very soft. And
Yeah.
so like if it was just a little bit more directed or had a way across, then it would just like it would make this one little stream hop as opposed to like coming down the whole path. But I'm sure a lot of that changes from season to season. We just had a huge storm go through the Thursday into Friday before we went on the hike, so I'm sure a lot of it was just water that has come down. Because I mean, it was
Yeah.
running water. I was just like, where on earth is this coming from? And it must be just saturated from all the rain that happened just a couple
Mm-hmm.
days before. Um, because we were fairly high, in certain points. So, but it was fun. Like it was still a very nice day, and packed a lunch, and you have a nice break. Half an hour, sit down and enjoy a beautiful view, and being up high on the cliffs is nice. The cliffs are like 400 feet in places, so it's you get a very very picturesque kind of panoramic view of the Minas Basin. But I'm glad I did it. It's on my bucket list. I can't say I'm going to do it all the time, but um, I would much rather hike Duncan's Cove here in the city than um, go back to Cape Split. But again, it all depends on like who you're with and who's done what. And if I had someone with me that had done Duncan's Cove but had never done Cape Split, then I would say, well, let's go do Cape Split because it would be an adventure for
Mm.
them, right? That sort of thing. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, that's what I was doing this weekend. What were you up to this weekend?
I was doing my play. I was
Right?
doing my
Of
show.
course, I went to go see that on Friday.
Yeah, it was good. It was I hate talking about myself and things that I'm doing, like when it's like in a boastful sense. But no, so I did my show Safe for our local Halifax Fringe Festival, and it went really really well. We won an award
Nice.
for most tickets sold at our venue. So the way the Fringe works is you have multiple um productions, and oftentimes a lot of them are sharing the same venue space. And a lot of people were in the same venue that we were in. There was at least 4 or 5 other
Oh
shows. I
wow.
say was the product. It's still going. It's going on until the 8th. Um, and so we could only bring like a small amount of like props and things with us, and everything had to be really easy to tear down. So it just stayed a blank slate essentially on the stage. Um, but our so you came on the Friday, right?
Yes, it was
On
the
the first
first
day.
first day. Yeah.
I almost wish people had come on Saturday, because that was the day all of us were like super on, and everything went perfect, and it
Mm,
was all just really really good
right.
that day. And that was like the best day. And then Friday, I think a lot of us were kind of just feeling, oh, it's over. It's kind of a bummer.
Right.
Because we put a lot of work into it, right? Like, that's the weird thing about a play, that you put so much effort and so much time and energy into getting it up, and then when you only have a certain number of shows, it's like, well, I spent 2 months to do 3 shows. It feels like a weird payoff, but
Mm.
at half hour each. But um it was good. It definitely is a good beginning stage of getting back into theater again. I haven't done theater in like the last 4 or 5 years or so, so this was a good jump off into the theater universe all over again. And Israel's great. The guy who wrote the show, he's great visionary, and he's got a lot of really fun ideas. Um, but yeah, what did you think of the show? Because I've been with it for so long
Mm.
that nothing
Hmm.
really surprises me anymore. Um, but I want to know what your thoughts are as an audience member and someone who doesn't know the history behind it.
Well, I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was a very accessible play because if especially for people like me that like theater but don't go very often, because it's only a half an hour show, like it's like when you have something that's on Netflix or something like that, and everybody's talking about it, and you want to get into it, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, the episodes are only a half an hour and there's only 10 of them. Like, it's all of a sudden it's
Hmm.
very accessible. You're like, okay, this isn't a lifetime commitment of like 8 seasons and an hour long drama and all this kind of stuff. So it's very accessible that way, and so I enjoyed for for what it communicated in a half an hour. I thought it was great at just kind of like dropping you into this futuristic world where there's an oppressive regime, there's a resistance force, there's um, a bit of explanation and exposition about like what's the plot, like why are people upset, and why is the fight happening. um,
Hmm.
and I thought because uh, I guess I think it was some of the digital sound effects that helped. Um, because remind me, there was like a helicopter noise or something at some
Yeah,
point.
helicopter noise. There was gunshots.
Right. And so that the
Um,
gunshots I found were less an immersion thing, and I really read them as part of a pacing thing. And I like that. Like, it was, we're gonna have some dialogue, and then I have to shoot my target, and the target was always like three very rhythmic, like bang, bang, bang. It was
yeah,
like a clock, right? And so, like, we're gonna make a point, we're gonna have a conversation, target again, bang, bang, bang. And
yeah.
so I appreciated that. Like, I got the timing of it.
Hmm.
I found that it was really quite easy to get sucked into the world, So everybody that was like, what do you? Forgive me for not knowing, but what do you call it when like the actors are looking out over the audience, like kind of out into space at something else? Is that a technique or a special thing other than just like don't make eye contact with people?
Well, it's also like yeah, a nerve-wracking thing for me, but it's kind of meant to. It's so that part of the stage is called the fourth wall. Like, the
Oh,
audience
okay.
is the fourth wall. So like when someone were to direct their attention directly to an audience member, that would be breaking the fourth wall.
Right. Okay. So look,
Um,
then that makes sense. It's like looking at the camera on a film. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Um,
So it's more just, um, yeah, yeah. I'm not really sure what it's called, to be honest with you,
the
but
point being that everybody that was on set, for the most part, was really good at doing that when you're supposed to be outside in some sort of battle zone, where the play and the festival and the time frame doesn't allow you to have elaborate set pieces or dramatic kind of lighting stuff happen that really kind of
mhm.
make you feel like you're out in the middle of some battle zone. It's more of a it's just on the actors to kind of make you feel like they're looking at something, or that they're running from something, or that they just came from something important. And just that little added nod of just the helicopter noise, it's just enough for me to be
Yeah,
just like, yeah, cool, I'm there, I see it. I mean, and you guys were in like, it was tactical gear, but I mean, essentially it was motocross, helmets and pads and things like that. But it
yeah,
worked because you're all
yeah.
in black, and you're really not. I mean, people that are in the audience and the play are just like, they're not expecting like, you know, crazy props. It's meant to be more just like, suspension of
Like,
disbelief.
yeah,
Yeah, and it worked.
yeah,
It worked very, very well. And you guys had a couple of cool little props for like sci-fi scanners and things that just had little LED lights on them. And I mean, it was perfect because
yeah.
again, the added noise just it like at that point it doesn't matter what you could be holding a brick, but if the brick is making some cool hum when the character holds it up to something, then that's fine. Like that works totally. And I think that the sound design really helped sell that. Not
Yeah.
to belittle the acting and the story. Like all of that was obviously the main story aspect and what kind of sucked you in. And
Right.
I really enjoyed. Well, I mean, I've told you at dinner after on Friday that I mean, biased as I am, I really enjoyed your performance in it.
Oh, thank you.
And having
Thanks for that.
heard you speaking about acting, before, and then actually for the first time getting to see you do it was very very
Yeah.
cool. Uh,
Well, that's oh, thanks.
you're welcome.
Thank
No,
you.
it's
Yeah.
great, especially, and I think and Alistair brought it up was that we're friends with you, so we know how you speak. Like we are familiar with you when you're not acting, and there
Hmm.
wasn't outside of the fact that some of the things that you were saying were not things that we would normally hear you say, but how you were speaking was exactly how we hear you speak all the time, which I thought was great because it made it feel less like you're reciting lines and just more like,
Right.
more like a natural kind of dialogue. And I enjoyed the pacing of a lot of the scenes that you were in, not just for your acting, but like the writing and the pacing of both characters in general, where characters would speak almost over one another. It wasn't so much an argument as it was just a passionate conversation. Someone's
Yeah.
concerned about another, and so you'd have that kind of back and forth. So I like that part of it too. Um,
I'm glad.
yeah.
I was really glad because my grandmother came to see it and I was like, "Oh, she's not going to get any of
Oh
this. Like
wow.
she's just here just to support it." That was my fear.
Hmm.
But she was right in the front row and I went up to her after. She was like, "Oh, I really enjoyed that. I even understood
Oh
everything. That was a
wow.
great story." And she was just like super excited. And I guess she looked at one of the other ladies. So funny story, one of the ladies who was like an extra, there was like just an extra guard essentially. There was five main cast and then an extra body
Right. Yeah.
on the stage, and that woman was the mother of the girl who played Emma,
Okay. Yep.
like the teenager.
Hmm.
Come to find out, as my mom's waiting outside the theater, I say hi to mom, and then my mom says, "Oh, hi, Melissa," to the woman who's in the show. They're friends. I didn't know that they were friends because Halifax is a small city.
Yeah.
It's really, really small. And then and what makes it even funnier is that my sister's name is Emma, and the girl who played Emma, her name is Ella. So it's just this whole anyway.
Yeah.
But hilarious. But I guess my grandmother said to Melissa after the show, she was like, "My granddaughter kissed a girl."
Yeah.
It was just like super, like, you know, it was just really funny. Um, but I found out, I didn't know this, but my mom had told me this. I guess she was talking with Israel after the show or before the show or something, and he told her, he's like, "Yeah, like halfway through Megan's audition, he was like, 'Yeah, she's cast, whatever,'" which made me feel really good. I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know that. He didn't tell me that." But it was really nice. But no, it was a fun show. I'm glad it translated well. And one thing that I was actually very surprised of is that the twist at the end. For those who don't know, I'm actually the bad guy in the show, because it's not playing again at any time, so I think I can spoil that. Um, but no one knew that that was a thing. Like I was actually really surprised that that wasn't more of an obvious thing. Everyone seemed really shocked that it was me. Everyone's like, "Oh wow, I totally didn't see that coming at all." Like, you and Colin and Alistair, you guys are pretty up on media and seem like, I feel like you'd be able to guess what happens in a show
Right.
at any given point, right? But like all of you were just like, "Well, I didn't expect that." That was like, like I wasn't anticipating that. And even like my friend Mitchell and Sky came to see it on the last day, and they were like, "Yeah, no, that was we didn't I didn't expect that at all."
Well,
And I'm like, that's good. It's a
yeah.
good thing. But I was honestly surprised that it wasn't more of a giveaway for people, because I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. Like I can see that being a thing." I wasn't surprised when I read the script, but I was just like,
Mm.
"That's good. That's a good twist. I hope that lands for people," and it did. And I'm really
Yeah.
happy that it
No,
did.
the twist that you are essentially a triple agent. Uh, I think. Yeah. No,
Well,
double agent.
double
Double
agent,
agent. Sorry.
double agent, but in the reverse. So everyone thinks that I'm a double agent for the good guys, but I'm
The
actually
double
double
agent for the
agent for
bad
the
guys.
bad
Yes,
guys.
exactly.
Yeah.
But and in that way, with the way that the plot synopsis was written, and we shared that on the show a couple weeks ago, it's essentially that someone on in the main characters is going to be the double agent, but in some parts you think it's, I can't remember the character, not your character, but the character that you're involved with.
Oh, Julie.
Julie.
Sam is the actor, but
Yeah,
Julie.
Julie. So the character Julie, you kind of think, okay, well, there's the double agent, and you weren't at what point you weren't sure where you came into it, but then you were also like a double agent in training. So, but it so the description was like, a person that has emotions has to pretend to not have emotions to infiltrate this emotionless regime and essentially save the day.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not revealed in the description as like who that is, or and the fact that there is a double agent doesn't, it doesn't tip you off to that twist. It tips you off to the another twist, and I think that's why people don't see it coming, is because they're looking for it in
Oh.
a different, like it's misdirection. They give you the turmoil, they give you the, what's the word I'm looking for, um, they give you the catch. Like, this is the one. This is what makes this thing interesting, is that there's this character that has to play both sides. But what you think of is, person pretending to be bad in order to be good, not the reverse.
Right.
Your brain, just because of Hollywood and everything else, your brain just kind of goes, person that's good has to pretend to be bad to save the day, not that the bad guys are going to win, right? And I think that was a good way to flip it. Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned to you a few times that there was some dialogue that I thought was a little bit clunky, but it
Yeah.
doesn't break anything. It's just, I mean, there's clunky dialogue in the thing that I'm going to talk about today. So it's always out there, and it's a matter of subjective and
Yeah.
perspective and all that kind of stuff. But I think that, um,
I think I might try, like, if Israel has more scripts that he wants to produce, like even like radio dramas and
oh,
stuff with the
cool,
same world.
radio drama would be so fun.
Radio dramas. Oh, also I found out that um his movie that inspired like the play that I'm in and like this whole universe that he's created, it's called Drown the Lovers. It's on Prime Video.
Oh,
You
is
can
it
actually
really?
watch it on Amazon Prime. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
interesting.
called Drown the Lovers by Israel Ekanem, Ekanem. And it's, yeah, it's like a short film, little one, but it's on Amazon Prime,
Cool.
Prime Video, and that's what inspired the play that I'm in. And he wants to do. I think he's releasing a radio drama for that one too, because we recorded an audio version at some point. So I'm not sure where that's going to be. I don't think he's finished
Hmm.
editing it yet. Um, but he's also written some other scripts that kind of tie in. And I think he wrote a script on how, how in the show Renee talks about, like, I know the district, I got you the map,
Mm-hmm.
like the map that Emma has. um he wrote a script on how they got the map.
Right.
And so he's kind of written some other Splinter Cell like things of like other people in the same cell that you didn't see in our show. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of branching off with a lot of other characters, but it's all based in the same universe, which I really like. I like that whole immersive world thing.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting, and I wish I could create a world that's that immersive. And but I'm very character driven, not world driven. So
Yeah.
I prefer to write about characters I find interesting, not so much. I mean, and interesting worlds are interesting and they work well, but um I'm definitely more of a character driven person,
Yeah.
I think.
If I was to say that there was anything that was missing from the play, it would be the backstory into how these characters know one another and why they're so in, like, what brought that splinter cell or that cell together. And there's just no time in a half an hour play, like I get
Mm,
that,
yeah.
but it's one of those things where I feel like some of the dialogue that could have been spent on explaining that was just kind of spent on other things. And in a half an hour play, I feel like economy is key. Like,
Yeah.
if you had spent a little bit more time explaining like where the cell came from, how the map happened, and that kind of stuff, it would just kind of go to answer some questions that ultimately don't matter for the play. But when you have those unanswered questions that kind of nag on people, it's distracting. So while someone else is talking about what's going to happen next, and a key kind of like setting up the next scene, I was kind of wondering like, well, where did they come from and why is this happening? And so like, and so if I didn't
Mm.
have those questions, then I'd be a little bit more in it. But other than that, like, I mean, I think that it was really, it was a really well thought out in terms of like, I never questioned the world. I guess that's what I'm saying is that like you said, the
Yeah.
world building is so good that I never questioned it. It was just like, um, it was very easy. It was an easy pill to swallow, right? It was an easy thing to be
Yeah.
just like, yeah, okay, that's where we are, and everything is moving forward, and I can understand why these characters are upset and what is motivating them, and so the how did they get here matters less. But if it was explained a little bit, then it would at least kind of like stop those questions from popping up. But yeah, like I said,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was good. It was a good experience. I haven't seen theater in a very long time, so it was a
I
fun.
mean, Fringe is like an easy to digest
Hmm.
theater experience, and it's cheap for
Yes,
people who want to go. It's like most shows are between $5 and $10, sometimes 15. Um,
and you can pay what you want.
but
Like
rarely.
if
And
you
you can pay with,
yeah.
well, it's my show you could,
Oh, okay.
but some shows do have a fixed
Oh,
entry
okay.
fee, depending on what the show is and depending on the venue that they're in and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Like I think it depends on a lot of things.
When I say
Um,
pay what you want, though, I mean you can always go above and beyond. Like if the
yes,
show
yeah,
is a $10
yeah,
show and you just felt like making it a $20 show because you felt that that was worth it, regardless, then you could just totally do that.
yeah, for sure. But you can also like tip the artists and stuff too.
Hmm.
Like if you're like, oh, I only paid like $5 to get in, but after the show you're like, wow, that was worth way more. Here, let me just tip
Right.
some more. That's something that people do as well. Apparently we got a lot of tips
Oh,
on our
good.
last day. But our last day was we were sold out to the point that we had to find more chairs
Wow.
because so many people wanted to come into the show and everyone was like, is there another showing? And we're like, no, this is it. And they were like, people were really bummed. So I don't know. I don't know. I think Israel wants to try and expand the script a little bit. And hopefully he might try and pitch it to Jeremy Webb and see if we can get it on the Scotiabank stage at Neptune,
Oh, cool.
which would be really neat. I would be really into that.
Mm.
Um, but you know, I would. I haven't asked him yet, but I was like, if he wants someone to kind of proof edit his scripts and stuff to kind of take out some of the clunky
Mm.
dialogue and
Mm.
stuff. And I don't know if it was just like the version of the script that we got that we rehearsed off of and basically memorized or what, but I think that there's a bunch of factors at play. But like
And all small
he's
things.
also yeah, but he's fantastic to work with. He's got such great ideas and you know a lot of the sound cues and stuff are all stuff that he had already. And he was like, let's
Mm.
throw this in. This seems cool. Like this seems like a cool immersive experience. And you know for someone who'd never done theater before, like he's never produced a play before. Um, he learned very quickly that theater is a very different beast from film.
Hmm.
Very different because he'd started on doing only film. So in his brain, he's like, "Oh, we can cut that." It's like, no, we can't.
Mm.
This is all happening live, and like the show is not just what you see on stage. It's also what happens backstage. It also happens in who moves what props onto stage. Like that's the whole thing is a performance. Your performance is not what you do on the stage when you're doing it. It's the whole thing. It's how you stand behind the curtains. Like you know I had to stand in one spot and I didn't move because if I did it would distract the audience because the floors were creaky and like that was a thing that I
Yes.
had to
Yeah.
consider
Yeah.
and part of the performance. And like which prop I was grabbing and when, and like when I leave and go off stage after my first scene, like the romance scene with Julie, um, I had to leave and grab something from a bag, and that was part of my performance because it's like I need this for the next thing. I don't know, I'm not performing, and the audience doesn't see me, but it's something that I need to do my performance. So, ergo, it's part of the performance.
Right.
And that's something that Israel hadn't really considered before. So it was nice to see him kind of be like, "Oh, right, this is all it's all one cohesive thing,
Hmm.
and not just bits." I would personally love to see this as a short film as well. Like if he ever wants to produce it as a short film with either the same cast or if he wants to recast people, I'm cool with that too. I'd like to just see it.
Mm.
Maybe to have it as something it's accessible for people who are local, but for people who may want to see it externally, I
Yeah.
think having it like the Prime Video thing, I think it'd be really nice to do it that way.
Even a teleplay,
Um,
like
or a
even if it
teleplay.
was a closed set where there was no audience and you didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff, and he could control the cuts and things a little bit better, but then still had to
Yeah.
be theater. Like that.
Oh, that's an
That
idea.
could be really cool
Oh,
too, right?
I'll have to run that by him and see what he wants to do, and maybe it would be a good other run, and we can
Yeah.
also like redo scenes that don't work out really well and just
Probably
cut the best
cheaper
ones
than doing a
together.
short film too, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, he had a budget for it, but yes, it probably would
Yeah,
be much
yeah. I
cheaper.
mean,
Probably
I
just have
say
to rent
that
out a
completely
space.
out of ignorance. I don't know what it costs to make short films. I'm a publisher, not a not a filmmaker.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, most of his budget, I think, was put towards the costumes, and he
Mm-hmm.
has a lot of those still anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So those are his. He bought those.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
but yeah.
speaking of high budgets and costumes, I want to dive into the main topic for me this week, which is going to be spoiler free. So I will probably mention this in the summary for the show, but I have been just devouring the Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance on Netflix. I'm not going to spoil anything. We can talk about it at length, I feel, without really discussing the plot details. You've seen part of the first episode just because you've been really busy, and you have seen the 1982 film, The Dark Crystal.
Hmm.
I have seen The Dark Crystal many times as a kid or a young adult, but only once, I'd say, in the last 10 years. So I'm foggy-ish on a few things, but I know it enough to know the characters and I kind of feel the nostalgia when I get pulled back into the Dark Crystal and the world that they want to build. And I cannot recommend this show enough. Like, it is
Yeah.
phenomenal. I mean, you have to be on board for what you're into. Like,
Yes.
it's puppets. So straight up, like, you just have to be aware that it's a Jim Henson Netflix production, but it's puppets made in 2018, 19, because I have no idea how long this took to make, but the amount of physical stuff, matte paintings, puppets, props, sets, miniatures, even some stop motion animation, like everything that they could do to make something tangible and made by people was done. And
Hmm.
it shows. It really, really shows. Now, there are some times when they have to do some CG, and more often than not, it's less about CG and more about just layering shots. So, an example would be like maybe a chase scene with a chariot, and you've got these gelflings, which are the main characters, and they're kind of like imp fairy type fantasy characters. But they're a hand puppet, so people have their arm up the puppet, kind of like Kermit the Frog. Like their hands are moved around with sticks, and their mouth has got a person's hand in it.
Hmm.
But when they're clinging to the wheel of a speeding chariot, they've green screen stuff. So they've got the chariot spinning and rocking and rolling and doing all this kind of stuff, and then they've put that in front of a green screen, and then they put the speeding background in later, right? And it does
Right.
wonders. Like, it really, the peril and the energy and the how the hell did they do that is very, very paramount in the show. But it only comes in after. Like, when that's happening, you don't care how they do it. You're just worried that, the Gelfling is going to fall. It's like, you're like, oh God, what's going to happen? Like, yeah, you like Rian. Like, by the time this stuff happens in the show, you're invested in these characters. And so, to set things up, uh, Thra is the name of the world, and the world building is incredibly complex. Everything is connected. You've got Skeksis, you've got Gelflings, you've got Podlings. These are the main races that you've kind of seen as far as like sentient life. Then there's also some offset stuff like Algra is a character. She's a one-off. There doesn't seem to be more of her species. She's just like a kind of like a witch, kind of like a Gandalf.
Yeah.
Like she's kind of like
Yeah.
she's kind of in there as this kind of like special piece on the board. But there's lots of different Gelfling. There's different Podlings. All the other creatures tend to have kind of like a either wildlife or domesticated animal vibe. So like
Hmm.
there's uh, land striders are one from the original film that are in this, and this stuff is in the trailer. Like, this is not a spoiler. And I mean, so the land striders, they have this kind of like they look kind of like giraffe kind of idea in terms of their long legs. They don't have long necks, but
Yeah.
they have that kind of a feel. But they don't speak, like they just kind of like make noises, and gelflings ride them for transport, things like that.
Right.
And there's a lot of technology in the world, which is unique, but it's all kind of like steampunky. So it's not
Yeah.
like sci-fi so much as it is like um, gears and cranks and spools and static electricity spinning and like all that kind of stuff happening. So that is a little bit strange too, because there's also magic in the world. And it's this weird
Mm-hmm.
mix of like magic and energy, but also like herbalism and just like, mushing up this specific root for medicine. And like, so there's all this kind of like naturalistic stuff, but then there's this layer of mystical things layered like in there as well. Because the dark crystal, as the name kind of suggests, is this crystal of truth, they call it. And it's a powerful crystal that is somehow entwined with the planet, with Thra, and how it and the environment are tied together. So that when the crystal is corrupted, it affects the world. So the main driving plot is that there is the darkening. And so the energy force from the crystal has been twisted, and it is affecting all living things. Gelfling and their pets and podlings and spiders, and like everything is just having this hard time with this dark energy. But the world is just imaginative and beautiful and like so upside down. It's like nothing you've ever seen in fantasy. Like there's trees, but like everything is just unique. A lot of the plants look like they should be underwater, but they're not.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
a lot of the animals, even the landstriders, they have a really heavy insect vibe, even though they're 10 foot tall. Like
Mm-hmm.
and they obviously they have like a horse sort of feel to it, but then also when you look at their face, it's very much a bug or a bug fish. A lot of inspiration, especially with like bioluminescence and stuff. So a lot of deep sea kind of fish vibe happening with some of the designs. Like I mentioned, the Gelfling are kind of like imp and fairy type characters. If I was to put them as a scale, they kind of look like they might be Hobbit size. Like that's kind of the
Yeah. Yeah.
vibe
They
that I
seem
get.
very small.
Yeah, they're diminutive, and that's the idea, is that the Skeksis are the oppressive bad guys. Which again is not a spoiler. You take one look at a Skeksis and you go, "Oh yeah, bad guy." Like they're
Yeah.
they're gnarled and pointy and have fangs and beaks, and it's like they look like buzzards, but they're not. And they've got like there's all these kind of different things. I'm trying not to, because some reveals I felt are a little spoilery. Not that they really ruin any plot lines. It's just a fun moment that I don't want to spoil for people who might not know, what's up. So yeah, it's really really um, what's the word, like immersive is the word I'm looking for. It's so good and so artistically sound and well thought out, and everything feels like it's part of the same world. Nothing outside of the Skeksis feel alien, and it works because then like anytime you see a Skeksis building or presence or vehicle thing or whatever it is, that however it is that they make their stuff, it just looks so wrong. Like everything
Mm-hmm.
just looks exoskeletal and insectoid, and but in a backwards way. It's like the insides are on the outside, you know. Where,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like whereas everything else tends to have like uh, a very clear function. Like this little hairy creature that eat books, like it obviously it looks like an imp, like it looks like a rat or a mouse, or it has that kind of like vermin scale to it. And it has a clear function to basically annoy the people trying to make the books. But the thing that I found even more immersive, I guess, in the world is the lore that they build into this. Uh, Everything is connected, and what I like so much about it is that they play on some fantasy tropes of like these things are very aggressive looking and evil and dangerous, and therefore are usually evil. But maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
not. Like maybe, or if they are, then some characters need to fear them because maybe they're food, and then other characters are just like, no, I don't have that. Like this thing isn't going to be after me. So therefore, maybe I could befriend it. Maybe I could use it. Maybe we could just live in harmony. Like there's all these different kind of like balances and circle of life things that they try to portray and communicate in the storyline, which I think is very, very, very good. Um, Even the darkening, this intangible evil force, from the crystal isn't itself evil. It's not just out to destroy for the sake of destroying. It's reactionary, right? Like it's the crystal has been corrupted and therefore it's sick. So it's not that you
Yeah.
have to defeat the evil or the bad things happening, it's that you have to cure it. And it
Yeah.
has some real, parallels with, the current climate situation on our planet and all this kind of stuff. And I thought it was very, very well done in a not beat you over the head way,
Hmm.
which I find really good. So I feel like I'm on a bit of a ramble. So your first impressions, having watched like the first episode or half of the first episode, like where are you feeling about it so far?
Um, well, how similar it looks to the original is insane.
Yes.
Which is what I really liked about it. Because, like, I mean, Dark Crystal was a pretty transformative experience from my youth. Like, I remember watching that in like the '90s, early like late '90s, early 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
and um, that was yeah, like I remember it being really weird, but also being like, whoa, puppets can be kind of scary. Like I didn't like whenever I think of puppets, I think of like Sesame Street or the Muppets or whatever,
Sure.
right? So like having to see puppets that are actually a little bit creepy is also just I don't know, it was a weird like clash of stuff in my brain, but I kind of liked it. Um I for first impressions, I don't know at what point in the story it's at though, because I know that in the Dark Crystal, I always thought that like the Gelfling were more or less eradicated at that point. There was like only small little communities of them, or like there's only two left or something. Um,
So this is the important note. It's a prequel. So this happens.
okay,
This happens. This sets up the lore and kind of
of
get
the movie.
of the movie and gets you to
Okay,
where the movie can take place.
okay,
The
that makes more
problem, yeah,
sense.
the problem that I find there, this is not a prequel that you can and should watch before seeing the 1982 film. There are things
Mm,
about halfway through, even a little bit of the voiceover at the beginning, where they explain like kind of the setup of the world of Thra. It's like a 2 minute kind of like intro thing. That has a little bit of spoiler stuff in it. I didn't think about it too much because I, of course, have seen the Dark Crystal. But if you have not seen, if you're just like, what the heck is this? Why are all my 30-something friends flipping their lids and so into this? Do yourself a favor and go watch the 1982 film first, because there are some major reveals in the 1982 film that are treated like just matter of fact in the Age
hmm.
of Resistance. And so if you know that, then you'll spend the whole time watching the film waiting for that to happen, which to me was a really neat kind of like, oh, cool, I get it now sort of moment in the 1982 film. And I'm skirting around it on purpose, because if some people
Yeah.
listening have not seen The Dark Crystal, then they should do that. I'm a little sad I didn't go back and watch The Dark Crystal more recently. I had planned on doing it, but I didn't get to it. But I've seen it as an adult. Like I've seen it in the last
Yeah.
10 years, out since like watching it a lot as a kid. The one thing I'll say about it is that, it's 1982, it's fantasy, it's puppets, it's slow, because
Yeah.
one, that's just kind of how high fantasy was in the 80s, but also they can't move things fast because it breaks what was possible with puppets back then.
Hmm.
Here, which is one of the benefits of the show, they don't do it very often, but every now and again they flip between puppet and CG. And it's only for like really dramatic, really wide shots. Um, and boy, does it work. Like it
Yeah.
makes things threatening. Because when something's
Wow.
supposed to be evil and it's a puppet, but it's a dude in a suit or a dude or a girl in a suit, and they can only move so fast, there's
Yeah.
not a lot of threat there, right? But
No.
when you take something like an animal, let's say an animal's chasing you. I'm going to make this up. This isn't part of the film because I don't, or part of the series because again, I don't want to spoil these moments. But if you're a predator's chasing prey and the prey character is running away, it makes a lot of difference if that predator character can move at speed because then you feel the threat. If that predator character is just a puppet shuffling around, like it really there's not a whole lot
Yeah.
of threat to it. So a lot of the bad guy stuff in the Dark Crystal, the film, has to deal with we've already won, we've already established this hierarchy. You're just afraid of us because you have to be, because you're powerless, because you think that you can't do it. So it's a lot of posturing, which can be slow. Uh, and then
Yeah.
in Age of Resistance, they have the technology to have some action. Like I mentioned, chariot chases and stuff moving faster than you think puppets can move, which really suck you in. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that that again, this isn't a spoiler thing. This has been in the trailers, but female Gelfling have wings,
Yeah.
hence the little like at the end the like fairy kind of look-alike thing, so they can fly. Well, I can tell you right now, making a puppet look like it flies in 2019 is a hell of a lot easier and a hell of a lot more believable than it was in 1982. So stuff like that just makes this kind of thing feel phenomenal and really kind of sucks you
Yeah. No, like it looked really good. I watched it. Watched a little bit with Colin yesterday, and um it was I like it sucked me in right away. Like I think we were getting tired, which is why we didn't finish,
in.
and he had
Right.
to go to bed because he worked early this morning, so we didn't end up finishing it just because of the timing, but we would have had we been more awake
And that
and
first
had more
episode is a
time.
setup episode. Like the
Yeah.
thing about like what's going to happen next and how involved you get, and once you meet all the characters, it really starts to take
Hmm.
off in episode 2 because the main characters kind of have their plot devices by the second episode. In the first episode,
Yeah.
it's more about introducing people to the world of Thra, the different races of Gelfling, which I think is really cool because you've got Gelfling that live
Yeah.
underground, you've got Gelfling that live in the mountains, and then you've also got like Gelfling that live in the woods, which I think are really really cool. And they all have different designs too. So I'm going to tell everybody now that my favorite character is Deet, and she's a I can't remember the name of the species. It's a grog or something. She's one of the underground Gelfling, voiced by Natalie Emmanuel, who is Missandei from the Game of Thrones.
Mm.
Uh, Not that you'd know it to listen to Deet because Deet is well, she's young young woman character, so she's a lot more full of life than say
Yeah.
Missandei was on Game of Thrones. But just incredibly kind and curious, and the kind of character that comes out from being underground her entire life and has to wear a blindfold when she's in the sun for the first time, and is curious about all the different flora and fauna and stuff to the point where it's a little bit dangerous because like you as an audience member are looking at something that clearly has teeth and claws and stingers, and you're just like, that is dangerous, Deet. Don't go near that. And she's like, oh, hello. Who are you? And it's like, no,
Yeah.
I like you. Please don't get eaten. And so it becomes comical. Like she's just so positive that even when like shit hits the fan, obviously in this series, and she just kind of takes it all in stride.
Yeah.
And it has these undertones of like some of the characters that you would see in say like Avatar: The Last Airbender or um, the Dragon Prince. Like there are those kind of archetypes where you've got like the steadfast, you've got the always positive, not in an annoying way, but like you've got these kind of like underlying tones. You've got the incredibly curious, the Gelfling that question, like that always like, well, why is this the way that is? So you've essentially got like the scientist on the crew, so
Yeah.
stuff like that is
What's
just
her name? Brea? Her name's Brea?
is it Brea? I think yes. I think yeah.
Yeah.
Brea is the curious one. She's the princess. She's one of
Yeah.
the. So Harar is the name of the Gelfling capital, and so they all have what's called a Maudra, which is essentially a queen, and then the All Maudra is is the one in Harar, and that's like so that's the queen of everybody, ruler of
Okay.
everybody. They don't necessarily get into they don't get into any real lore as to why they're all women, but it doesn't matter, which I think is nice.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
so that it's like it just happens to be the way that it is. I think part of it is because Olgra, the one off kind of like that witchy character that I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
um, she's a woman. So I feel like all the
Yeah.
people that kind of rule in her stead or take up her mantle of like wisdom and balance and all that kind of stuff, they also happen to be women. Just out of just that's just how the lore is. Like, but it doesn't. So it's just another way that it skirts the traditional king and queen sort of thing with
Yeah.
fantasy. Like they just kind of make it just a little bit different. And the fact that they don't call them kings and queens, and
Mhm.
they don't take the time to explain it, and it's so good. It's so good that they don't say, "Oh, the Madra is our queen, and they rule the Gelfling." They never say that. You just get
Yeah.
it from the fact that there's a bunch of guards that are keeping this person safe, and that when she says stuff, everybody jumps and does what she says. You're like, got it,
Mhm.
queen, understand. Like I love that the show is not condescending. It's so good in that way.
Yeah.
Also, while we're on that fact, not for children,
Really?
not for kids. This is violent, disgusting. It is the themes. I don't want to say that they're adult, but they're not mature.
Brutal. Brutal.
No, well, no, no, no. Well, they deal with things like slavery and we'll say even politics and bureaucratic stuff and the under some of the details and the plots and the things that matter are going to go right over the head of anybody under 12.
Mhm.
And like you mentioned before about puppets being scary, something that's even more so with the fact that you can move these things quickly with CG, that you can create a lot more technically with physical special effects. Like there's a
Yeah.
little bit of, well, not say, I don't want to say horror, but in the kind of prosthetics and practical effects that you would see in horror films, those kind of techniques are utilized in some of the events in the series. I feel like it would scare the crap out of anybody under 12. And even then
Mm.
you'd have to gauge it based on your kid. Like it's misleading because you see a trailer with a gelfling flying around like a fairy and you think, yeah, my 6-year-old's going to love this. Don't do it. I'm not a parent, but I'm saying don't
Yeah.
don't do that unless you know your kid is just able to handle everything. But watch it first. Don't sit down and just let them be into it because you will be dealing with nightmares. Like the Skeksis are
Yeah.
creepy, man. And
Skeksis are creepy. That was one thing I didn't get when I first started watching is like why everyone like the Skeksis are obviously really scary looking, but everyone's like, "Oh my God, the lords," and they're just like super excited about them. It's like
so
part of
they
me is
explain
just
all
like,
that. Yeah,
oh, do they?
yeah.
Okay.
And it's one of those things where like you need to watch a couple of episodes for them to really kind of explain how the Skeksis are, how they are, and why the Gelfling are in there. Because again, like when you after seeing the film, where it's very clearly that Skeksis bad guys, Gelflings, underdogs slash victims, um, they they throw you into this where there's just a little blurb at the beginning, which is actually read by Sigourney Weaver, where
Oh,
they
I didn't realize that was Sigourney Weaver.
yeah, oh, it's a star-studded cast. It's kind of crazy. Uh,
I knew Mark Hamill was in it.
yeah, yeah, he
Like
is.
I didn't look at the cast at all, and then we heard his character talk, and like Colin was like, "That is 100% Mark
It
Hamill. I can hear
is.
the Joker in there."
Yeah, it is. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because in some cases, the celebrity voice kind of like overshadows the immersion. And
Mm.
so, because I've heard Mark Hamill in a number of different cartoons, he was Blinky and, or sorry, he was Blinkus. Blinkus? Blinky? No, he was Blinky's brother in Troll Hunters. And it's a very
Okay.
similar kind of like scientist, smartass, kind of stoogey, raspy troll voice that he does. It's not so different from the scientist. But
Mm.
I find now in some ways, in the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, when Hamill is doing his dialogue, the subtler stuff, it's much harder to tell. But when he's giving a
Yeah.
speech about like his grand machine or his whatever, and when they're posturing, it's difficult because then it really does sound like Mark Hamill just doing a voice,
Yeah.
and then that can be a little bit tricky. However, I have to say, like, again, with the puppetry and the advances that they make in the 80s, in order to get the tongue to move in any of these characters, you just had to move the head really fast. They just put a rubber tongue in it, and the faster that you wagged your hand to make the character talk, the faster the tongue would waggle. And in
Yeah.
this, I think it's CG. I still don't know exactly how they did it. And I haven't looked it up because I'm not done the series. I'm only on episode 8, so I can't. I don't want to go looking into the how to because then I'm going to get some spoilers. Um,
Yeah.
just unintentional. Even the Netflix, hey, let's start the next episode, and they look at a frame for the next episode, and you're like, oh damn it, Netflix! Like I don't want to see that. Like I don't want to know where they go next. I want to find out where they go next. And
Yeah.
I wish they would just have like a placeholder episode title card as opposed to like a scene. And it's not like the opening scene. It's like a midway point. It's like, damn it. um, so yeah, so with that, I don't know, but the Skeksis' tongues move, and they move with purpose. Like
I know.
they'll lick
Yeah.
their beaks or they'll do something. And so when the tongue comes out of the mouth and does something, I don't think it's animatronic. Like it really does look CG, but it's just this teeny little touch that brings a lot of life to the puppet. Um, and so like that to me was really really cool. The thing about the puppets that I find that is a delicate balancing act is that you've got a combination with a talented voice actor and a talented puppeteer, a puppet performer. I'm not sure exactly what they call themselves these days. Sometimes you don't get both, and that's where it falls
Right.
apart. So on
Right.
something like a main character like Dee, like I kid you not, Megan, I have been on the edge of my chair, mouth agape, just sucked into the emotion of a scene or wondering what's going to happen next. And in being emotionally engaged with a fucking puppet. Like it is incredible what sometimes these combinations of voice acting and incredible performances can do. On the flip side, sometimes these secondary characters do not get the same kind of attention and love, and you go, "Oh wow, that's a puppet." Like, and you get sucked out of where you just were. And so it
Right.
has some shortcomings in that way. I think a lot of it is just probably like we don't have the budget to put all the different subtleties into this puppet because it's in the scene for 2 seconds. Whereas this main character puppet is in the thing for the whole series, right? And so things like, eyes moving and eyelids and all that kind of stuff can happen in the main characters. But sometimes the secondary characters are just these dead husks that move their mouth. You're just kind of like, wow, that's not at all selling it for me. So that would be, I think, one of the not so good things is that sometimes the puppetry does kind of like pull itself back. But the farther into the series you get and the larger the world gets, the less that you start to see that kind of stuff because it becomes less crowd scenes and more focused on the main crew and the adventure and what they have to do. And so there's less characters involved at any one time. And I
Hmm.
feel too that they do this magical thing where, similar to the Lord of the Rings, how they had small actors cast for the hobbits in wide shots, and then they would use
Yeah.
the other characters, the main actors, in the close-ups with some camera trickery to make them look shorter. They do that
Yeah.
here, where in some cases, a wide shot of a gelfling walking around, it's a person in a suit. But it's a person in a suit either shot or scaled or done whatever to be the same size as what a gelfling should be. So,
Right.
and because they're a small person, whether it's a small actor or a child, um, uh, because of the way that they move, like their legs are shorter, they have a diminutive stature, so it sells it. And it's not a
Mm.
big shot. It's just meant to give you this sense of scale where we need this character to run through this hallway, and making a puppet run just looks dumb. So we're not going to do it. We're going to give you a half a second shot of this character in a suit running at stride, and it just sells it. Like, and you don't think about it while it's happening. It happens later. So I hope I'm not breaking the immersion for anybody. Um, there are some shortcomings. I know that I've been gushing about this, but um, one of the things that I find really um, tricky is I say how unimagined some of the names of things are. They get into some tricky stuff with the Skeksis where you've already met the scientist, and there's a character
Right.
Chamberlain, and so they have like these kind of like emperor, like they have these kind of like fantasy esque kind of names, but then they also have their Skeksis names, so it's like their name reflects their role. So the scientist is called Skektek, and you'll see different
Oh.
and yeah, and so you'll see different websites and different, like, so IMDb, or even within the show, they'll refer to one another. Instead of the general, they'll call him Skek something, Skek War. I don't know what it is, because it's confusing, and it's also on the nose to the point you're just like, well, who decided that was a good idea? Because that's
Hmm.
hella dumb, and it really kind of takes you out where it doesn't really make any sense. And some of the dialogue as well, like Chamberlain is a pretty famous character from the original film. That's the Skeksis that's kind of like down on his luck and is always scheming, and he's the politician. He's the gray worm sort of worm tongue, not gray worm. He's the worm tongue sort of character. He's the Skeksis that always goes, has that kind of weird kind of like habit of just like a verbal tick. He's really creepy. Uh,
Hmm.
and in this, I don't remember, but none of the other Skeksis speak in the third person. Only he does. And I feel like that was a thing maybe from the movie. But in this, he does it inconsistently. And I'm just like, well, if you're going to be third person, if you're going to say Chamberlain does this and you're going to break up your sentences and speak in broken English, you have to do it all the time. If
Yeah.
you in another moment refer to yourself as I, or have a complete sentence, pulls me right out. It's like, well, wait a minute, pick one. And honestly, I'd prefer that you would be creepy and be weird, but like speak in normal sentences, considering that every other Skeksis is doing that. So that kind of stuff I did find a little bit tricky. Um, Again, there's other names. Again, I'm kind of pulling back on this. I don't want to spoil anything. So there's other names of events and other things that are meant to be fun, and they are incredibly unimagined. It's like, honestly, you couldn't come up with something better than that. Like I was almost screaming at my TV alone in my apartment, just like, come on, And this is what I find so interesting, is that those kind of moments are usually the very kiddie moments. It's like, this is aimed at children. This scene, why is it in this show? Because you can't
Yeah.
let a kid that would be enjoying that scene watch this show. Like, if you're going to have to catch a podling, we'll leave it at that. And that's a fun sort of quirky things that happens. Then it should be something that is like annoying, and something that you can feel that the character that you're there to follow doesn't want to do this, and then it's really kind of um uh what's the word I'm looking for, like part of her punishment, not that it's this fun, weird, silly Sesame Street kind of thing, which is what it feels like. And you're just like, this is
Yeah.
odd. It really feels out of place. So there's a couple things like that. I mean, they are small, and it happens early. After things start to get more serious, it takes a different turn. But it's those little things that I find sometimes creep out. And honestly, it feels like producers just getting their grubby hands in there and just making changes that I don't think the writers would do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It breaks lore, it breaks any kind of immersion or the fourth wall. Like, I mean, it's like, if you bring something in that is from our time and place, like calling something tech, sorry,
Mm.
like, I'm out. That does not uh, that does not matter, like, or it doesn't work. Like, even referring to something as technology in the show, if it's part of the dialogue, like calling something a machine, that works because it's steampunky. But calling something
Yeah.
technology, when you consider that your audience is out here in 2019 with mobile phones and tablets and all this kind of stuff, it just rubs me the wrong way. These are small.
That's fair.
These are small nitpicks. But other than that, it's just such an immersive show, and I have to stop talking about it because I can't really get into any more without
Spoiling
spoiling some
something.
stuff,
Yeah.
and not even plot. I mean, it'd be easy to talk about it without spoiling the plot. Just reveals of moments, just reveals of certain things and certain character reactions. It's so much fun to experience for yourself, and I will guarantee you that on those moments where it's meant to suck you in, you will be absolutely surprised at how well they did with this show with puppets to pull you in.
Hmm.
Like it is better than most fantasy shows that have real actors.
Wow. Cool. I will definitely continue to watch it at some point when I have time
I will be bugging you
to
because
do
I will
so.
want to know. I will want to know what you think. I'm going to try to fit a spoiler bonus burst to cut somewhere and talk with some other people that have seen more. But I really needed to talk about it this week. I know I've been on a bit of a rant here, but yeah, it's 100% highly recommend. I know we're pressed on time, so I'm going to dive right into the Internet Minute and wrap things up. The Citadel Cafe is, of course, listener supported, and it is the first of the month, first show of the month, at which point I want to thank all of our patrons for supporting the podcast. If you're interested in becoming a member, you can do that at patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. Joining at any level, we get you an invite to the patron-only Discord server where we talk about all kinds of stuff. We have a spoiler room for things like this, so for people that want to talk about the Dark Crystal, but not spoil it for anybody else in the chat, there's actually a separate section so that you can go into the spoiler room and just kind of like proceed at your own peril. But there's people that are talking about it there that have finished it. The bonus episodes are something I'm trying to do more often. They're short, they're like 15 to 20 minutes. We call them barista cuts, and those are also a separate Patreon perk. So that's patreon.com/the Citadel Cafe. We are down to 17 patrons right now, so if you're like, wait, what, that's a lot less than it was before, you're right. And if you want to help out, if you want to join in for less than the price of a cup of coffee a month, then you can help make the Citadel Cafe possible. So my pick this week is a time-lapse video that I picked up from one of the artists that I follow on ArtStation. His name is Dave Greco, and he was pulled in by what we talked about last week with World of Warcraft Classic. And so he decided to do a character painting of a dwarf priest that he was going to roll in the game. And he introduces a little bit at the beginning of the video, but most of it is just an easy time-lapse painting with some music. So it's a pretty easy watch if you want to just kind of throw something on for something for chill viewing. But it's a really cool painting. I thought he did an excellent job, and I just liked watching that kind of creative process happen. Really kind of pulled me back into World of Warcraft to see what is essentially some pretty limited graphics in the actual game be turned into a really cool character painting. So check that out. We'll have the link in the show notes. Greco is Greco. He's on ArtStation and Instagram and a bunch of other places as well. That wraps up this episode of the Citadel Cafe. You can find out more about the show, links to all the things we talked about at thecitadelcafe.com. Music for the show was composed by Kevin MacLeod, and you can, of course, email us at thecitadelcafe@gmail.com and let us know what you think of the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. Find us by name on Twitter and Facebook. You can also subscribe on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, and Spotify. I am working on YouTube. We'll see if I can get that going soon, but I know that that might help with some discoverability and the folks that are out there that live on YouTube, and that's where they want to listen to shows. Word of mouth is, of course, the easiest way to support the show. Just poke a friend in the arm and say, hey, this is cool, you should listen to it. It goes a long way. Our listeners are up. We've actually increased quite a bit over the last few months, so thanks for all the people that are sharing the show. Please keep it going. It's going to be great to try and grow the community and see where the show goes in the future. My name is Joel Duggan. You can find everything I am up to online at joelduggan.com. That includes my illustration and design portfolio. If you're looking to hire me, then just drop me a line there. You can also check out my other podcasts about Minecraft at thespawnchunks.com. Megan, where can people find you and all the wonderful stuff that you're doing online?
People can find me online on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Megan Townsend. And if you want to follow my personal project, The Heir of Keldanan, which is kind of fantasy-esque, you can find that on Instagram too.
You've been listening to the Citadel Cafe, where we are fast, easy, and cheap, but you can only pick two.